Take care of America first. We are sending mountains of money overseas, but our own communities are dying, Michael Snyder reports. And as you watch what's going on in Washington, it should sicken you. Why do our politicians insist on showering other countries with money when our own communities are degenerating into rotting, decaying hellholes right in front of our eyes? We just learned that the Biden administration decided to give Ukraine another $300 million aid package. That is on top of the several dozen other aid packages that have already been announced. Of course, the Ukrainians are not the only ones that are receiving our hard-earned tax dollars. In 2020, the U.S. gave foreign aid to 157 different countries. What a madness. That's madness. There are $31 trillion in debt. U.S. is in $31 trillion in debt, and our cities are rapidly decaying, but we're handing our prizes to almost everyone else in the world as if we were Willy Wonka. On Tuesday, Mike Cernovich posted something on Twitter that really made me think. First time I flew back from an international flight, 1999, was good to be back. In 2015, saw what a dump the U.S. was becoming. It's hard to travel now, as once you return, it's bleak and dystopian here. We live in security state with crumbling infrastructure, worst of all worlds, he said. And I can't argue with that, Michael Snyder says. Just look at Gary, Indiana. Once upon a time, it was an extremely prosperous industrial community, but now it's become a semi-apocalyptic shell of its former self, quote unquote. Not even an hour's drive southeast from the center of Chicago sits Gary, Indiana, a semi-apocalyptic shell of its former self. Originally founded in 1906, Gary, Indiana was not always the way it is now. During the middle of the 20th century, Gary was a booming steel town and a hub for the United States Steel Corporation. Domestic steel workers and newly arrived immigrants flocked to the city for its economic opportunity, and during the 50s and 60s, Gary was thriving enough to rival other major industrial hubs like Chicago and Detroit. So how did this once thriving center of industry collapse into the semi-abandoned murder capital of America, quote unquote? Why can't something be done to revitalize Gary, Indiana? Of course, there are hundreds of other cities all over the nation that are falling apart, and that includes our capital city. Several decades ago, Washington, D.C. was a really nice place. But now the infrastructure is falling to pieces. There are homeless encampments all over the place, and crime is out of control. In fact, it's being reported that carjackings in the city have been skyrocketing over the past 5 years. Carjackings in Washington, D.C. continue to skyrocket in line with a 5-year trend that has the local police chief, Robert Conti, lamenting that crimes are happening at a pace that I have not seen in my 30-plus years career here with the Metropolitan Police Department, he said. Needless to say, crime has been rising all over the U.S., and many of those crimes never get solved. Today, only about half of all murders in our country actually get solved. That ranks us dead last in the entire industrialized world. The true toll of crime in Chicago has been revealed after figures show that just 1/3 of murders are solved in the Windy City. That statistic shared by NPR shows that the vast majority of homicides in Illinois did not get cleared between 2016 and 20. And it sits below the national average of 50% that are cleared, and that statistic in itself is cause for embarrassment, with the United States having the lowest murder clearance rate of any industrialized country, the lowest. So that's just pathetic. Much of the crime that we're experiencing is being fueled by the greatest drug crisis in the entire history of our country. Thanks to all of the fentanyl that's coming in over wide open borders, hordes of addicts endlessly wander our city streets like zombies. In Los Angeles, San Francisco, New York, and other big cities, the sight of homeless people collapsed on sidewalks and lurching from moments of slumber to bouts of shivering and violent shivering have become all too common. And just when you think that it can't get worse, somehow this crisis goes to an entirely new level. For example, the number of people passing away from this. In San Francisco, actually increased by 41% to the first quarter this year compared to the same last year. San Francisco is one of our wealthiest, most prosperous cities, but now this crisis in the city is so bad that retailers are pulling out at a frightening rate. Nordstrom just became the latest major chain to announce that they are leaving. Nordstrom is planning to close both of its downtown San Francisco stores, choosing not to renew its lease obligations at its location in the Westfield Mall, and it will also close a second nearby downtown Nordstrom rack. And the retailer confirms the closures on Tuesday. In an email to employees, the company's chief stores officer wrote that the dynamics of the downtown San Francisco market have changed dramatically over the past several years, impacting customer foot traffic to our stores and our ability to operate successfully. And Michael Snyder says, I can definitely understand why retailers are pulling out of the city, such as San Francisco, Portland, and Chicago. But as crises spread, it won't be too long before similar conditions are present in virtually all of our major cities. According to Millennium Health, there was a 9-fold rise in use in the Western United States between 2019 and 22. And Millennium Health, which processes drug tests nationwide, recently told Daily Mail that its researchers had detected a 9-fold rise in fentanyl use in the Western United States between 2019 and 22. A lot of people think I'm exaggerating when I say that we're in the midst of the worst drug crisis in U.S. history, but I'm not exaggerating one bit. So why are we sending so much money overseas when it's desperately needed here at home? Enough is enough. Just a few hours ago, Marjorie Taylor Greene posted the best message I've ever seen from a politician in a very long time. I've reproduced the entire message below because it's certainly worth reading the entire thing. Every American should understand our situation as it stands right now. You've all been trained to be loyal to political parties just like you are loyal to a sports team, but for our country's very own survival, you must put down your mascot and see things clearly. We are in $31 trillion debt because of politicians from both sides who have held power for decades and hold power right now. Then these same politicians want a clean debt ceiling increase with no strings attached so they can just keep insanely spending your hard-earned tax dollars until we fully collapse. We are on the brink of a nuclear war from our involvement in the Ukraine-Russia war because of the politicians from both parties who have held power for decades and hold power right now. And the top guys in the free press, quote unquote, got fired for talking about it because the owners of the media company support defending Ukraine's border and talking to Ukraine's president about it. Our border is out of our control and invaded daily by thousands of people and deadly drugs because of the politicians from both parties who have held power for decades and hold power right now. But you're being told that by everyone that Ukraine's border is the only border we must defend. Big corporate banks backed by the Treasury are swallowing smaller banks in terrifying speed, while these same politicians aligned with others who have financial interests are moving America along with the world to digital currency. At the same time, America is being converted to electric vehicles by the same politicians and their financially invested friends, not because of consumer demand or because electric vehicle batteries are American-made and good for the environment, because they're not. When everything is digital and electric, will Americans still blindly trust those same old politicians who wave their beloved political mascot as they hold the full power to turn off your bank account and power to drive and recharge and censor your ability to even speak about it if you go against the current thing? Corporate communism is a very real threat to individual freedoms and independence, and America is nearly fully controlled by it because the same old politicians from both parties who have held power for decades and hold power right now. So while they are failing America by putting you $31 trillion in debt and now arrogantly demanding another debt ceiling increase while pretending to care about our border security, while our BPA are overwhelmed with over 22,000 border apprehensions and countless getaways in the past 3 days. And Title 42 will be lifted May 11th, which will open our floodgates. And they are drooling with bloodlust for their precious war against nuclear Russia in Ukraine, defending democracy, quote unquote, instead of responsibly brokering a peace deal with the two countries and using our military to defend our own border that is heavily controlled by the cartels. And the President of the United States family has been involved in money laundering in exchange for influence at the highest level of our government, with his son at the head of the criminal enterprise running the show, while also involved in other trafficking. And literally everyone in Washington has known for years, but now some of us hold the proof in our hands. But the power to prosecute lies with the complicit DOJ, whose alliance lies with the same old politicians from both parties who have held power for decades and hold power right now. I won't participate or go along to get along. Washington has nothing to offer me, and clearly Washington has nothing to offer the American people either. End quote. And she's right. And we're on the road that leads to national suicide, but most Americans keep voting for the same corrupt politicians from both parties over and over again. And as you watch what's going on in Washington, it should sicken you. They don't care about us, and they certainly don't care about our future. And if we stay on the path that we're on currently, America is not going to have a future. This is by Michael Snyder. He says about the author, "My name is Michael, and my brand new book is entitled End Times is now available on Amazon. In addition to my new book, I've written 6 other books that are available on Amazon, including 7-Year Apocalypse, Lost Prophecies of the Future of America, The Beginning of the End, and Living a Life That Really Matters. When you purchase any of these books, you help to support the work that I'm doing. And one way that you can really help is by sending copies as gifts to family and friends. Time is short, and I need help getting these warnings into the hands of as many people as possible. I have published thousands of articles on the Economic Collapse blog, End of the American Dream, and the Most Important News. And the articles that I publish on those sites are republished on dozens of other prominent websites all over the globe. I always freely and happily allow others to republish my articles on their own websites. But I also ask that they include this about the author section with each article. The material contained in this article is for general information purposes only, and readers should consult licensed professionals before making any legal, business, and financial or health decisions. I encourage you to follow me on social media, Facebook and Twitter, and any way that you can share these articles with others is definitely a great help. These are such troubled times, and people need hope. John 3:16 tells us about the hope that God has given us through Jesus Christ. For God so loved the world, which he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish but have everlasting life. If you have not already done so, I strongly urge you to invite Jesus Christ to be your Lord and Savior today. And this is by Michael Snyder from the Economic Collapse blog, and it's on Collective Spark. Please leave your comments. Thank you for your support. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support, and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.